Thanks for coming in this afternoon, Steve. It's really a pleasure to get to spend time with you. Steve Brown is the owner, broker of Iron Gate Realty here in Dayton, Ohio. It's a firm with 350 agents.
Yes.
You've been in the real estate business for 40 plus years.
Yes.
You're a very young looking man for having been around that
Good.
long. And Steve is also the past president of the National Association of Realtors in the year 2014.
Right.
And so he's not just a very successful businessman in this community. He's widely respected among his peers. And from my own personal perspective, working with Steve and talking to him about housing issues, Steve, like me, makes a lot of his income from helping people buy things or sell things. Now, I am in a different business. I'm a financial services professional. So I help people buy and sell securities. I make sure they buy the insurance products that they need to protect their incomes and their lifestyles. But what I really think of myself is as an advisor. And what an advisor is somebody who really attempts to know what's the truth about a person and what their needs and circumstances are. And in my own personal interaction with Steve, Steve will spend an hour asking you questions about what's going on in your life. What do you want to accomplish and what's important to you? And to me, that's the definition of an advisor. It's also the right way to conduct yourself in a business setting. And so I want everybody to know that I know a guy who can help you in these areas and doesn't need to have a paycheck hanging out there in front of him. So, and I really appreciate that. I value that highly. One of the issues that many of my young clients face, particularly those that are medical residents, is that they are finishing their residencies or coming into their residencies, getting their first paycheck, which might be, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month at that first job when they're residents. And then when they finish their training, they get that second first paycheck where they actually start making money. Either way, they're entering into those jobs with a mountain of student loan debt. I mean, and it's not unusual. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much the rule that 300,000, and up. I've seen it as high as $650,000.
Sure.
That these young people have, and I'd like you to talk for a minute about how that affects their options as regards to financing the purchase of a home.
So I have had that experience as well, working with a resident who is coming into the market who does come in with extraordinary student debt. I think that first of all, the first thing to do for any resident is to realize that that's an investment, and not to look at it just as a debt, right, but look at it as a tremendous investment in your own career, investment in your future, and the earnings that you can possibly realistically anticipate in the future. There is no doubt that debt in today's world, not just for the medical resident, but also for the first-time home buyer,
right,
is the number one reason why people cannot buy a home. They have the high debt structure. And when we talk about debt, we're not just talking about student loans.
Right.
We're talking about a car loan. We're talking about normal credit card payments.
Mm-hmm.
Those normal things that everyone has to have in order to be employed in today's world. We are not in a market here in the Miami Valley where you can take a bus or a train to work.
Right.
You're going to have to drive to work. You're going to have a vehicle to do that. And so debt is not just your student loan, but debt is all those other things that make life that are necessities
Make it
in
possible
your life.
for you to participate in society and
exactly,
in employment.
and in employment. So there are certain lenders who will look at a person's debt, especially a medical resident's debt, in terms of not counting the student loan debt,
Mm-hmm.
but just looking at the other debts that they carry. So when you go for a loan, in fact, any good realtor and financial advisor is going to look at the overall financial picture to see, is this affordable? Number one, can you do you meet the qualifying guidelines? Most loans today, residential property loans, have to meet certain secondary financial market guidelines, as
Right.
you know. Many residents come in unable to meet those secondary market guidelines. And so we then take them to lending institutions, and there are a few, not many, who will then restructure the way they look at their ability to qualify for a loan and set aside their student portion of the debt and qualify them on the basis of their other debt. But Keith, I would say that those programs are few and far between.
And becoming less common.
Much less common,
Mm-hmm.
because every lender wants to package these loans in a way that they can then turn around and sell them
Right.
on a secondary market. That's getting into something that normally a homeowner doesn't even think about.
No.
But that's why you have certain lending restrictions.
Right. And that kind of conforming loan
Yes.
process is one of the things that has made it harder for lending institutions to do things in a unusual, or like you say, in a way that doesn't count a certain type of debt,
Right.
like student loan
Right.
debt.
Right.
And in most of those instances, those institutions are holding that loan in their own portfolio. They're not
Right.
able to sell it.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why, the way the marketplaces work anymore, it's harder and harder to find institutions that will do it, or even those institutions that might do it, they only have a limited amount of their capital that they want
to dedicate to those type
kind
of
of
loans.
programs.
But with all that said, there are many financing options
Mhm.
today. I know we all think about a 30-year fixed rate loan,
Mm-hmm.
but for the resident that's coming in, the home that they are buying today is not the home they're going to live in for the next 40 years.
Right.
It is their first home, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they stay in the community, it's still their first home.
Right.
There's going to be a second and maybe a third home, certainly in their future. So there are programs when you sit down with your realtor or a financial advisor that you can then sit down and look at the other financing options that there are. For example, an adjustable rate mortgage. A lot of people think, oh my goodness,
Right.
I don't want to be tied into something but when you look at these programs that say are fixed for 3 years
Right.
and then adjust,
If you're only going to be here 3 to 5 years, what's the risk?
it is the perfect loan for you
Right.
to have. And oftentimes, even if you stay beyond 3 years, remember that loan adjusts at your current balance of loan, not at your original balance.
Right.
So, and all these adjustable rate loans today have caps. That is, they cap how many points or how many percentages you can add on to the original mortgage.
Right. Over
loan.
the life of the loan, or over a short, or
Over a short
every,
time. So, for example, if you were able to get a 3-in-1 or a 3-in-3 ARM, adjustable rate mortgage, you could look at a cap. Let's say that rate, I'm just going to pull this out of the air, is 4%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say that you stay beyond 3 years and you want to continue in the home, and that has a 2% cap. Well, the highest that rate can go up would be 6%.
Right.
But over 6 years, if it's a 3-in-3 ARM, meaning fixed for 3, fixed for 3, fixed for 3,
Right.
your average rate is 5%, and that would be below a 30-year fixed rate mortgage.
Right.
At this point in time.
And realistically, people tend to stay in their homes for under 10 years.
Yes.
Particularly the younger part of the buying population.
It's interesting because people are staying in their homes longer today than they did 10 years ago.
Right.
The average 10 years ago was between 3 and 5 years. The average today is up to 7 to 8 years.
Right.
In staying in the home.
Well, some of that might take care of itself once we've gotten past the memory of the real estate debacle of 2007 and 2008. Right. But that's a whole nother story. My first mortgage for my first home was 11.75%.
I was going to say it was a double digit.
Yeah, it was 11.75%. Right. And so it may be hard for people for young people today to understand, how really limited the risk is of a adjustable rate mortgage when you start at such a low level.
Exactly.
At such a low level of interest rates right now.
Right.
So, well, thank you very much for talking to us about that topic. I appreciate it very much.
Sure.